Welcome back. This is part 3 of chapter 80 in The Discoverers. Salon wits sneered at the physiocrat's earnest calculations, but Adam Smith felt at home. An economic freethinker himself, as we have seen, he had preached many of the same notions back in Glasgow and had already begun writing his textbook on economic liberty during his idle hours in Toulouse. Now he seized the tiniest clues to what the old regime had done to France. By contrast, even to the poor Scottish peasants, French peasants still wore wooden shoes or went barefoot. Quote, "In France," he observed, "the condition of the inferior ranks of people is seldom so happy as it frequently is in England, and you will there seldom find even pyramids and obelisks of yew in the garden of a tallow chandler. Such ornaments, not having in that country been degraded by their vulgarity, have not yet been excluded from the gardens of princes and great lords." End of quote. Though he saw the people of France, quote, "much more oppressed by taxation than the people of Great Britain," end of quote, he did not yet foresee the coming violence. But like Quesnay, he insisted that economic freedom was essential to improve the condition of the people. Adam Smith said he would have dedicated The Wealth of Nations to him had not Quesnay died 2 years before the book was published. Unseduced by the charms of the salons, the playhouses, and Quesnay's lively company at Versailles, Adam Smith longed passionately to return to old friends in Scotland. His departure was more sudden than he had planned because of the shocking murder in the streets of Paris of the Duke's younger brother, who had also been put in Smith's charge. Stopping briefly in London, where he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, he settled back with his mother in the familiar haunts of his native Kirkcaldy. There he spent the next 6 years, enlivened only by daily walks in the sea breezes of the Firth of Forth, and an occasional trip to Edinburgh, writing The Wealth of Nations. In the spring of 1773, Adam Smith went to London with what he thought was a nearly completed manuscript. His manuscript proved less finished than he had imagined, for the next 3 years in London brought a flood of new facts and ideas. He dined from time to time with Dr. William Hunter, the anatomist, Robert Adam, the architect, Sir William Jones, the linguist, Oliver Goldsmith, Sir Joshua Reynolds, David Garrick, Edward Gibbon, Edmund Burke, and Dr. Johnson. But he was not always regarded as their equal. Quote, "Smith is now of our club," end of quote, Boswell reported. Quote, "It has lost its select merit," end of quote. The great question of the hour was, of course, the American Rebellion. This was providential for Adam Smith, who believed America a kind of laboratory for the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Benjamin Franklin, then Pennsylvania's agent in London, trying vainly to avert the separation, boasted, quote, "The celebrated Adam Smith, when writing his Wealth of Nations, was in the habit of bringing chapter after chapter, as he composed it, to himself, Dr. Price, and others of the literati, then patiently hear their observations and profit by their discussions and criticisms, sometimes submitting to write whole chapters anew, and even to reverse some of his propositions," end of quote. The American Rebellion dramatized the cause that Adam Smith had defended for 13 years in Glasgow among the merchants trading with America and the planters who had returned. For The Wealth of Nations, the American colonies, their settlement, their plight, and their promise, were a source of endless examples. The New World, land of the future, offered a unique opportunity to test the virtues of economic liberty. The fruit of 12 years of writing, and before that, of at least 12 years of focused thinking on its large subject, The Wealth of Nations was finally published in 2 volumes on March 9, 1776. The publisher, who had paid Smith some £500 for the manuscript, did not lose money. The book sold well from the beginning, and the first edition was exhausted in 6 months. It was barely noticed by the reviewers, but Adam Smith's friends, London's literary luminaries, praised it privately without stint. They compared it with the first volume of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which had appeared just 3 weeks earlier, on February 17, 1776. David Hume, a loyal Scot, praised Gibbon's volume from Edinburgh with the outburst, quote, "I should never have expected such an excellent work from the pen of an Englishman," end of quote. Smith's work, he said, required too much thought to be at once as popular as Gibbon's. Still, he prophesied a great future. Quote, "What an excellent work," Gibbon himself exclaimed, "is that with which our common friend Mr. Adam Smith has enriched the public. An extensive science in a single book, and the most profound ideas expressed in the most perspicuous language," end of quote. When a jealous critic carped that the book could not be good because Adam Smith had never been in trade, Dr. Johnson retorted sententiously, that, quote, "There is nothing that requires more to be illustrated by philosophy than does trade. A merchant seldom thinks but of his own particular trade. To write a good book upon it, a man must have extensive views," end of quote. Adam Smith's extensive views gave his book a power surpassed by no other modern book. He was the true discoverer of the modern science of economics. This modern science flourished, opening new paths from all the other sciences to a science of wealth and economic well-being. But, as might have been predicted, Adam Smith's prospectus for exploring the wealth of nations became a chart of orthodoxy. His description of the body economic had much of the appeal that Galen's held for earlier centuries in describing the human body. Brilliant interpreters and elaborators, notably David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, embroidered Smith's ideas and offered these as established truths. The ambitious Mill's Principles of Political Economy climaxed in a chapter, quote, "of the grounds and limits of the laissez-faire or non-interference principle," end of quote. There he listed his few exceptions, most conspicuously the enterprise of colonization, to the rule that, quote, laissez-faire should be the general practice. Every departure from it, unless required by some great good, is a certain evil, end of quote. This classical period, lasting for a full century, was followed by a neoclassical period pioneered by the Cambridge economist Alfred Marshall, 1842 through 1924, whose Principles of Economics in 1890 offered a newly persuasive revised version of Adam Smith. Classical economics provided a framework and a vocabulary even for bitter critics of the society it purported to describe. Karl Marx himself, who was both, quote, "much more and much less than an economist," end of quote, is placed by historians of economics firmly in the classical tradition. During the heyday of classical economics, most of the leading writers were not full-time professional economists. I'm so sorry, I'm struggling. Let me try that one more time. During the heyday of classical economics, most of the leading writers were not full-time professional economists, but were businessmen like Ricardo or Engels, civil servants like J.S. Mill, or journalists like Marx. The word economics, in place of political economy, to describe the subject matter of a new profession, came into the English language only in the 19th century, and professional associations did not appear until the American Economic Association in 1885 and the British Economic Association, 1890. By the mid-20th century, just as classical physics would describe an outmoded physics, so classical economics came to describe an economic doctrine of the past. For there was a revolution in economics too. The man mainly responsible for one of the most remarkable intellectual phenomena of modern times, and in proportion to his influence, one of the least celebrated. John Maynard Keynes, 1883 to 1946, son of a lecturer on moral science and economics, who was an academic administrator in Cambridge University, hardly had the social background for a revolutionary. Schooled at Eton, he secured traditional grounding there in mathematics and classics, and he thrived under the arcane discipline of that curious place. He even applauded the Etonian version of football, quote, "the present form of legalized ruffianism, the best condition under which one can play the glorious game," end of quote. At King's College, Cambridge, he was elected president of the Undergraduate Debating Union and became a disciple of Alfred Marshall. Already in Cambridge, he had joined the free-thinking demimonde of the so-called Bloomsbury Group. Their leading spirit was Lytton Strachey, whose mordant wit and irreverence for Victorian sacred cows set the tone of Kane's own sallies. This group included E.M. Forster, Virginia Woolf, and some of the leading critics and artists who, for their time, were shockingly tolerant of homosexuality, pacifism, and a bohemian style of life. In the civil service examination, Keynes ranked second in the nation, and after 2 years in the India office, he returned to Cambridge, where a brilliant treatise on probability brought him a fellowship at King's College. His Catholic tastes in art and in ideas stirred Cambridge gossips, especially when he married the ballerina Lydia Lopovkova. Some called her a chorus girl, who had actually danced the can-can under Massine's direction. Their marriage was long and happy. And there I will conclude part 3. We'll be back to conclude chapter 80 momentarily.